My wife secretly swapped our IVF embryo with her ex's sperm and lied for months, so I exposed the betrayal, filed divorce, took everything, and walked away forever. I'm Jack, 32, male. Up until a few months ago, I thought I had a pretty decent life with my wife, Emma, 31, female. We had a house in an okay neighborhood, both making good money. To everyone on the outside, we were that couple that seemed to have their love together. You know the type. We even had this giant Maine Coon cat named Thor, who was basically our first kid. A huge orange fluff ball that would sleep on my chest every night and attack my feet every morning at exactly 5:30 in the morning, like clockwork. Emma always said Thor was more my cat than hers. She wasn't wrong. He'd follow me around the house like a dog and would sit in the bathroom sink while I got ready for work. For 2 years, we'd been trying to have a kid. 2 freaking years. At first, it was exciting, like, hey babe, tonight might be the night. But after months of negative tests, it just became this dark cloud hanging over us. Every month was the same: hope, disappointment, silence, repeat. We'd just sit there, not talking, because what was there to say? Better luck next time? Yeah, right. I remember this one night, after another negative test, Emma just sat on the bathroom floor crying. I didn't know what to say anymore. All our friends were having kids left and right, posting their perfect family pics on Instagram, and we were stuck in this loop of disappointment. After a bunch of tests, the doctors couldn't find anything specifically wrong with either of us. Just one of those unexplained infertility cases that drive you nuts because there's nothing to actually fix. Emma suggested IVF one night, her voice all shaky when she said, "It's our best chance." I didn't even hesitate. I said yes right away because I thought we were in this together, you know? I mean, that's what marriage is supposed to be, right? A team. The financial hit was tough. Insurance only covered part of it, so we dipped into our savings, but I figured it would be worth it in the end. We'd finally have our family. Emma took over everything with the IVF process. She said I was already stressed with work and she'd handle all the appointments. Just routine stuff, she'd say. The clinic will call if they need anything important, she told me, and I trusted her completely. I did go to a few key appointments. When we went in for the actual embryo transfer, I was right there, holding her hand while the doctor explained everything. I remember thinking this was our special moment, the beginning of our family. I even took a picture of us in the clinic room to remember the day our kid's life began. The first few months after the procedure worked, everything seemed perfect. Emma was finally pregnant. The morning sickness wasn't too bad, and we started turning the spare room into a nursery. I painted the whole thing myself over a weekend. Thor kept trying to help by walking through the paint tray and then across the carpet, so that was fun to clean up. We were even on the same page about not wanting to know the Zex, wanted it to be a surprise. Emma had names picked out for either option. We were making plans, building a future, at least that's what I thought we were doing. Her pregnancy was going smoothly. She hit the 5-month mark and was finally showing for real, not just the "is she pregnant or did she have a big lunch" kind of showing. I was getting more excited about becoming a dad with each passing week, already had a list of dad jokes ready to go and everything. I started putting together the crib one night, and man, those instructions might as well have been written in ancient Egyptian. It took me like 3 hours and a YouTube tutorial to figure it out. Thor kept jumping in the box and attacking the little Allen wrench. Not helpful, buddy. At this point, I was doing all these little things to prepare. Reading those what to expect books that Emma bought. Downloading apps that tell you how big the baby is each week. Your baby is now the size of an avocado. All that stuff that first-time dads do. Then, one random Tuesday night, I was going through some boring insurance paperwork, just making sure everything was covered for the delivery. Emma was already asleep, and I was at the kitchen table with Thor purring in my lap, sorting through all the medical forms and bills we'd collected. That's when I noticed something weird. A sperm donor ID that wasn't mine. Not my name, not my patient number from the clinic. Some completely different code. At first, I thought I was just tired and reading it wrong, but I checked it again, compared it to my own patient number from another form, no match. That was the moment everything in my chest went cold. I told myself it had to be some mistake. The clinic probably just messed up the paperwork. There's no way this was real, right? I mean, Emma wouldn't. She couldn't. I didn't sleep that night, just lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering if I even knew who she was anymore. The next morning, I waited until she left for work, then drove straight to the IVF center. I remember sitting in the parking lot for like 20 minutes, just trying to work up the courage to go in. Because deep down, I think I already knew. When I finally walked in, the receptionist gave me this weird look, but I kept it cool, super polite, just asking for information. I was reviewing some paperwork for my wife's treatment, and I noticed something strange. "Can you confirm which embryo was used for our procedure?" The receptionist, Melissa, according to her name tag, smiled and started typing away at her computer. Then I saw her face change, that little frown, the slight head tilt. My stomach dropped before she even said a word. "That's odd," she said, squinting at her screen. "It looks like the embryo used wasn't the one initially assigned to your case." I felt my heart pounding in my ears. "What do you mean?" "It looks like a donor specimen was used instead," she said, looking up at me with this confused expression. "But that should have required your signed consent." I just stared at her, trying to keep my voice steady. "I never signed anything." She checked the file again. "It says here that your wife authorized the change." Everything inside me went cold. "So you just switched embryos without checking with me?" Her face went white. "That's not supposed to happen. We have policies to prevent that." "Then explain how it did," I said, trying not to lose it in the middle of the waiting room. She started mumbling about getting a supervisor, but I was already heading for the door. I needed to confront Emma now. I called my boss on the drive home, told him I had a family emergency. I must have sounded as messed up as I felt because he didn't even ask questions, just told me to take whatever time I needed. I drove way too fast, my mind racing with a million thoughts. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I was shaking from rage. I remember thinking, as I put my key in the door, that this moment was going to be the line in my life, everything before now and everything after. And I was right. I walked into the house and slammed the door behind me. Thor bolted from his window perch, like I just set off a firecracker. Poor dude hated loud noises. I expected Emma to be at work, but there she was, sitting on our couch, crying. Her face was all red and puffy, hands shaking as she wiped her eyes. I barely made it inside when she said, "You went to the IVF center." It wasn't even a question. That's when I knew for sure this wasn't some mix-up. She knew exactly what I'd found out. I just stood there, staring at her, not saying a word. Honestly, I was afraid if I started talking, I'd start yelling, and I've never been the yelling type. "My friend Olivia works there," she whispered. "She texted me that you were asking questions. She told me you were upset." I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. "Is that the same friend who helped you switch the embryos?" She sucked in a breath, her whole body flinching. That was all I needed to see. She knew exactly what she'd done. "Why?" My voice came out ice cold. I didn't recognize it as my own. She rubbed her face, looking anywhere but at me. At one point, she tried to reach for my hand, and I stepped back like she was trying to hand me a snake. "You wouldn't understand," she finally said, still not meeting my eyes. I wanted the best for our child. I wanted strong genes, healthy genes." "Meaning?" She hesitated, then finally said, "I used an anonymous donor from the clinic's database, someone with better genetic traits. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut." "Better than mine?" I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because this wasn't just a betrayal. This was straight-up insanity. "The donor has no family history of heart disease or cancer," she rushed to explain. "He's tall, athletic, has a doctorate in biochemistry. I wanted to give our baby the best start. You know what's messed up? My dad had a minor heart condition, nothing serious, just needed medication." Emma knew that. She was basically saying my family's genes weren't good enough for her. "So, you decided that without telling me? You just erased me from our child's life, and you thought that was your decision to make?" She stood up, arms wrapped around her belly protectively. "It's still our baby, Jack. You'll still be the father in every way that matters." "Except actually being the father," I shot back. "Except for the part where you lied to me for months. Except for the part where you went behind my back and made this massive decision without me." Thor had crept back into the room and was sitting in the corner, eyes wide, watching us. "Even the cat knew this was bad. I was trying to do what's best for our family," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought you'd understand if I just what? Found out after the baby was born? When were you planning to tell me, Emma? Or were you just hoping I'd never find out, that I'd raise some stranger's kid thinking it was mine?" She didn't answer that, which was an answer itself. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think. "And this friend of yours at the clinic, Olivia, she just helped you commit fraud? Because that's what this is. You forged my consent. You lied on medical documents." Emma's eyes went wide. "It wasn't like that. Olivia just helped with the paperwork. She didn't forge anything. Right, she just conveniently forgot to get my signature before swapping out my sperm for some random donor." There was a long silence. Emma kept opening her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closing it again. Finally, she sat back down, shoulders slumped. I thought I was doing the right thing. I really did. I grabbed my keys from the counter. "I need to get out of here. I need to think. Where are you going?" Her voice was small. "Anywhere but here." As I headed for the door, she called after me, Jack, please, we can work through this. We're having a baby. I turned back to her. No, Emma, you're having a baby. I'm apparently just the guy who's supposed to pay for it. I grabbed Thor's carrier from the closet, scooped him up despite his protests, and threw some of his food in a bag. No way was I leaving him behind. You're taking the cat? She asked, incredulous. Yeah, I'm taking the cat. At least he's actually mine. I walked out, not knowing where I was going, just knowing I couldn't stay there another minute, without saying things I couldn't take back. It wasn't until I was halfway down the block that the weight of it all really hit me. Everything I thought I had, everything I built, it was all a lie. Thor meowed from his carrier in the passenger seat, his little paws pressing against the mesh like he was trying to figure out what was going on. Yeah, buddy, same, I told him, feeling like an idiot for talking to my cat, but honestly, at that moment, he was the only family I had left. I drove around for hours with no real destination, just me and Thor cruising the streets while I tried to wrap my head around how my life had imploded in a single day. Eventually, I ended up at my buddy Mark's place. I didn't even call first, just showed up at his door with a cat carrier and probably looking like I'd seen a ghost. Dude, what the hell? Was Mark's greeting when he opened the door. Then he took one look at my face and added, Love, get in here. I gave him the short version while he grabbed us both beers from his fridge. His reaction was pretty much what you'd expect, lots of what the actual love. And she did what? Mark's girlfriend, Jen, came home while I was mid-story and immediately went into crisis mode, setting up the spare room for me and getting a makeshift litter box for Thor. I think I was still in shock because I just let them handle everything while I sat on their couch, staring at nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep, just lay there in their guest bed with Thor purring on my chest. I turned my phone off when Emma called for the 8th time. I just couldn't deal with more lies. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I'll call her Vanessa. She's this badass woman who helped my brother through his divorce a few years back. When she asked what was going on, I laid it all out. If I leave her now, what happens with the baby, I asked. She looked over my case and frowned. You're legally presumed the father since you're married, unless you challenge paternity in court. If you don't contest it, you could still be on the hook for child support, even though it's not biologically yours. I almost threw up right there in her office. Emma had nearly trapped me permanently. What if I prove she committed fraud? Vanessa tapped her pen on the desk. That changes everything. If we can show she deliberately misled you, you won't be financially responsible. But we need solid proof. The fertility clinic's documentation helps, but ideally, we need her to admit it on record or in writing. And our assets, move them now. If she files first, she can argue for half of everything. I had a lot to process, but something was still bugging me about Emma's story. The anonymous donor with perfect genes seemed too convenient. Can we subpoena the actual donor records from the clinic? I asked. Vanessa nodded. We can try. They'll fight it on privacy grounds, but given the circumstances, we might have a shot. What are you thinking? I'm thinking my wife is still lying to me. Over the next few days, I started getting my love together. First thing I did was pull most of our money out of our joint accounts, leaving just enough that she wouldn't immediately notice it was gone. Probably not the most ethical move, but at that point, I wasn't feeling particularly ethical. I moved all my important documents to Mark's place: birth certificate, passport, the deed to my car. I even called the credit card companies to freeze any new charges on our shared cards. Emma kept calling and texting stuff like, "Please come home and we need to talk about this, and I still love you." I ignored most of it, just sent one text saying I needed space. Meanwhile, Vanessa was working on getting access to the donor records. The clinic was fighting it, claiming patient confidentiality, but the judge was sympathetic to my situation. Apparently, fraud will do that. On day 5 of staying at Mark's, I finally agreed to meet Emma at a coffee shop, neutral territory, a public place where I wouldn't lose my cool. I got there early and picked a table in the corner. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked terrible. She sat down across from me, hands immediately reaching for mine across the table. I pulled back. "Jack, please," she started. "I know I messed up." "I know you're angry, but we can fix this." "Fix what, exactly?" I asked. "The fact that you lied to me for months? The fact that you decided my genetics weren't good enough for our child?" She flinched. "That's not what it was about. I just wanted the best for our baby." "Yeah, you said that. But this anonymous donor story, is that even true?" Her eyes darted away for a split second. Bingo. "Of course it's true," she said, but her voice had that slight quiver that I knew meant she was lying. I leaned forward. "Who is it really, Emma? Because I'm going to find out one way or another." That meeting at the coffee shop didn't go anywhere. Emma stuck to her anonymous donor story despite me catching her in the lie. We ended up leaving with nothing resolved, except me feeling even more certain she was hiding something big. I went back to Mark's place, where Thor was living his best life, getting spoiled by Jen, who kept sneaking him treats when she thought I wasn't looking. At least someone was happy in this whole mess. For the next week, I was basically living two lives. During the day, I'd go to work, pretend everything was fine when coworkers asked about Emma and the baby. Then I'd head to meetings with Vanessa where we'd spend hours documenting everything I could about our finances and the IVF situation. I even drove back to the house one day when I knew Emma would be at her prenatal appointment. It felt weird using my own key to sneak into my own home, but I needed to grab more clothes and check if there was anything else I should take. That's when I found Emma's laptop. She always kept it protected, but I knew her passwords. She used the same 3 for everything and had me write them down once when she forgot them. Classic Emma move, being secretive but also disorganized. I hesitated for about 2 seconds before logging in. Normally, I'd never go through someone's private stuff, but normal went out the window when she decided to lie about our kid's paternity. At first, I didn't find much, just work emails, Amazon orders, pregnancy forums. Then I checked her email trash folder. I found deleted messages between Emma and her friend Olivia from the clinic, dating back almost a year. They were planning the whole thing. Olivia telling Emma when she'd be working so she could handle the paperwork. Emma asking if it was really possible to use a different donor without me finding out. But the real deal was an email thread with someone named Ryan. The subject line was, are you sure about this? I felt my stomach drop as I opened it and started reading. Ryan Matthews, her college boyfriend, the one she dated for 4 years before me, the one she used to mention now and then when talking about her past, the one whose Facebook profile she'd occasionally check just to see what he's up to. The emails were friendly at first, catching up, how's life been, that kind of thing. Then Emma mentioned our fertility struggles, and how she'd been thinking about him a lot lately, how they'd always talked about having kids together back in college. Then I saw the text that made my stomach twist. She told him she was using his sperm from when he donated to the clinic years ago. Apparently, he'd been a regular donor during med school for extra cash. His response, surprise, but not anger. He asked if I knew and was okay with it. Emma straight up told him, Jack doesn't need to know. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. I took pictures of everything with my phone. My hands were shaking so bad some of the shots came out blurry. I forwarded key emails to my own account, then deleted the forwarded messages from her sent folder and emptied her trash again. The whole time I felt like I was going to throw up. It wasn't just some perfect genes donor. It was her ex-boyfriend. She wanted to have his baby, not mine. I must have sat there for 20 minutes, just staring at the wall after I closed the laptop. Everything made sense now. The secrecy, the lies, why she was so insistent on handling all the IVF appointments herself. When I got back to Mark's place, I sent everything to Vanessa. She called me almost immediately. This changes everything, she said. This proves premeditation and deliberate deception. The judge is going to have a field day with this. What's our next move? I asked, feeling weirdly calm despite the chaos. We keep gathering evidence, and we find this Ryan guy. It wasn't hard to find him. Ryan Matthews, physical therapist, working at a clinic about 30 minutes from our house. I looked him up online and recognized him immediately from pictures Emma had shown me years ago. Tall, athletic build. The kind of guy who probably played sports in college. The kind of guy who donates sperm because clinics pay extra for tall athletic donors. I made an appointment under a fake name. Probably not the most ethical thing, but ethics weren't my priority anymore. The look on his face when I walked into his treatment room instead of the Mark Johnson he was expecting. Priceless. Pure shock, then recognition, then something that looked a lot like guilt. Jack, he said, frozen in place. What are you doing here? I closed the door behind me. I think you know exactly why I'm here. To his credit, he didn't try to deny anything, just sat down heavily on his stool and ran his hand through his hair. She told me you agreed to it, he said finally. Said you two had talked about using a donor and that you were fine with it being me. And you believed that? That I'd be okay with my wife having her ex-boyfriend's baby? He winced. Looking back, no, it doesn't make sense. But Emma can be convincing. Tell me about it, I muttered. For what it's worth, I didn't know she was lying to you. I wouldn't have agreed if I'd known. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but it didn't really matter. The damage was done. So what happens now? He asked. Are you going to punch me or something? I almost laughed. No, I just wanted to see if you'd lie to my face like she did. I turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Did you two reconnect before or after we started trying for a baby? He looked confused. Before, I guess. She reached out maybe 3 years ago, said she was in town and wanted to grab coffee. We've been in touch on and off since then. 3 years. The whole time we were planning our family, she was laying the groundwork for this. I nodded and walked out, feeling like the last piece of the puzzle had finally fallen into place. I drove around for hours, trying to process everything. The betrayal was so much deeper than I'd initially thought. This wasn't just Emma making a messed up decision about genetics. This was Emma planning for years to have her ex's baby while married to me. I finally headed back to Mark's place around midnight. He and Jen were already asleep, but Thor was waiting by the door like he knew I needed some company. I scooped him up and just sat on the guest bed, petting him while I tried to figure out what to do next. The next morning, I called Vanessa and told her about my conversation with Ryan. "This is gold," she said, "but we need more. Can you get Emma to admit any of this in writing? Text messages, emails, anything?" So I did something I'm not proud of. I texted Emma saying I wanted to talk things through, that maybe I was overreacting about the anonymous donor thing. I told her I was willing to listen if she'd just be honest with me. She responded immediately, obviously relieved that I was coming around. We agreed to meet at our house that evening. Before going over, I had one more conversation with Vanessa. We went over the plan for protecting my assets and my future. She had already prepared the divorce papers, just needed my final go-ahead. When I got to the house, Emma had clearly gone all out trying to make it nice. The place was spotless. She'd made my favorite dinner, even put flowers on the table like this was some minor disagreement we were patching up. "Jack," she said, rushing to hug me when I walked in. I let her, but didn't hug back. "I've missed you so much." "We need to talk," I said, not sitting down even though she gestured toward the dining table she'd set. Of course," she said quickly. "I want to explain everything." "Good, because I have questions," I said, pulling out my phone and hitting record. I started recording. "So tell me again about this donor, the anonymous one with the perfect genes." She launched into the same story she'd told before, about wanting the best genetic profile, about making the choice out of love for our future child. I let her finish, then said, "And there's no other reason you chose this particular donor?" She hesitated, just for a second. "What do you mean? I mean, is there anything else about him that made you choose him specifically?" Another pause. "No, just the health profile." I nodded slowly. "So it has nothing to do with the fact that it's Ryan Matthews?" The color drained from her face. "What?" "I saw the emails, Emma. I talked to Ryan. I know everything." She started crying then, those big dramatic tears that used to make me want to fix whatever was wrong. Now they just made me angry. "It's not what you think," she sobbed. "Really? Because I think you deliberately chose your ex-boyfriend's sperm, had your friend Olivia bypass clinic protocols, lied to me for months, and planned to let me raise another man's child without ever telling me the truth. Is that not what happened?" She kept crying, saying how sorry she was, how she never meant to hurt me, how we could still be a family. I turned off the recording. I had what I needed. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I've already moved most of my stuff out. You can keep the furniture, but the house is in my name, and I'll be selling it." "You can't do that," she said, suddenly looking panicked. "I'm pregnant. Where am I supposed to go?" "That sounds like a problem for you and Ryan to figure out. He doesn't want anything to do with the baby," she practically screamed. "He just donated sperm. He's not ready to be a father." I almost laughed. "Well, neither am I, at least not to this kid." Thor chose that moment to meow loudly from his carrier by the door. I'd brought him to get the rest of his things. She yelled while crying, "Jack, please, I know I messed up badly, but I love you. We can work through this." I turned to look at her, really look at her. Maybe for the last time as her husband. "No, Emma, you don't love me. You love what I provide. Stability, a home, a father for your baby. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." I picked up Thor's carrier and headed for the door. "I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings," I said, not looking back. "Don't call me anymore." As I walked to my car, I felt a weird mix of emotions. Anger, obviously. Hurt, definitely. But also relief, like I'd finally cut loose an anchor that had been dragging me down. Thor meowed again from his carrier. "I know, buddy," I told him. "Let's go home, our real home." That night, I sent the recording to Vanessa. She texted back almost immediately. Perfect. She admitted enough. We move forward tomorrow. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, paperwork, and planning. Vanessa filed the divorce papers and a motion to legally establish that I wasn't the father of Emma's baby. Meanwhile, Emma was blowing up my phone with messages ranging from desperate apologies to angry accusations. "You're abandoning me when I need you most, and I can't believe you're being so cruel. And my personal favorite, it's still your baby in every way that matters." I blocked her number after that one. Mark and Jen let me stay with them while I looked for a new place. I found a decent apartment that allowed cats and wasn't too far from work. The hardest part was dealing with friends and family who didn't know the whole story. Emma had apparently been telling people I'd had some kind of mental breakdown and abandoned her during her pregnancy. Some people actually believed her, which showed me who my real friends were. My parents were solidly on my side once I explained what happened. My mom cried when I told her she wouldn't be getting the grandchild we'd all been expecting. My dad just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're doing the right thing, son." When the court date finally came, Vanessa presented the emails, the texts, the recorded conversation, the testimony from the clinic about protocol violations. She even had a statement from Ryan confirming Emma had misled him about my knowledge and consent. Every time Emma's lawyer tried to paint me as the villain for abandoning my pregnant wife, the judge would just look at the evidence folder and raise an eyebrow. Every time Emma's lawyer tried to interrupt, the judge held up her hand. I've seen a lot in this courtroom, but the level of deception here is extraordinary. The final judgment came down exactly as Vanessa had predicted. The divorce was granted. I wasn't legally responsible for the child, and Emma got nothing from our shared assets since the fraud was so clearly documented. Given the evidence of fraud, Mr. Wilson's assets remain his sole property, the judge said. Mrs. Wilson will not receive any financial compensation from this divorce. Additionally, given that Mr. Wilson is not the biological father, the court recognizes his right to revoke any paternal claims to the child. He will not be financially obligated for child support.
Emma's lawyer made one last attempt, asking for consideration due to her vulnerable state as an expectant mother.
The judge shut that down immediately. Mrs. Wilson willingly deceived her husband, knowingly altered medical procedures without his consent, and falsified financial statements. There will be no additional compensation awarded. One tap of the gavel, case closed. Emma just sat there, frozen. Her lawyer closed his briefcase without a word. I stood, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out without looking back. Outside the courthouse, I took the deepest breath I'd had in months. It was finally over. That was 6 months ago. Now I'm still in my apartment, though I'm thinking about buying a small house with a yard where Thor can watch birds. He's doing great, by the way, currently sleeping on the keyboard as I try to type this. I deleted all my social media for a while just to avoid the drama. When I came back online, I found out Emma had moved back to her hometown to live with her parents. The baby was born last month. A boy, according to mutual friends who still talk to her. I try not to think about it. Looking back, I'm still amazed at how quickly someone I thought I knew completely could turn into a stranger. The Emma I married and the Emma who did this to me, they can't be the same person, right? But they are, and I just didn't see it until it was almost too late. If there's any lesson here, I guess it's that you never really know someone, even after years together. People can surprise you in the worst ways, but also, you're stronger than you think. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. Now I'm doing okay, not great, not terrible, just okay. And sometimes, okay is enough. Final update. Hey Reddit, it's Jack again. I wasn't planning on updating, but some crazy love went down last weekend that I need to share. I'm chilling at home, watching the game with Thor, when someone starts pounding on my door. I open it to find Emma standing there with her parents and her brother Mike, and she's holding the baby. They push their way into my house before I can stop them. Emma's mom immediately starts with, "It's time you took responsibility for your son." I'm like, my son? We both know that's not my kid. There was a whole court case about this, remember? DNA evidence, Ryan Matthews, your ex-boyfriend whose sperm you used? Mike gets in my face and says, Ryan skipped town 3 months ago, completely ghosted Emma, quit his job, deleted social media, he's not paying any child support. That sucks for her, I say, but it has nothing to do with me. Emma starts crying, bouncing the fussy baby. I made a mistake, Jack. A horrible mistake. Her dad jumps in with some BS about how, in the eyes of God, the kid is still my responsibility because we were married when he was conceived. Emma actually has the nerve to say, "Look at him, Jack, he could be yours. We don't really know for sure." "We do know for sure," I say. "There was a paternity test. It was in your court documents." Her mom, "Those tests can be wrong. Look at his eyes, they're just like yours." The audacity of these people trying to gaslight me is unreal. I told them to leave, and Mike shoved me, saying, "You're just going to abandon your wife and child? She's not my wife, and that's not my child. And if you touch me again, I'm calling the cops." Emma, full-on sobbing, "Please, Jack, I can't do this alone. My parents are helping, but I had to quit my job. We're barely making ends meet." For a split second, I almost feel bad. Almost. Then I remember the months of lying and deception. Mike tries to step toward me again, but his dad holds him back. You'll regret this, Mike says. We know where you work. We know your parents' address. That's when I pull out my phone and start recording. Are you threatening me? Should I call the police now, or would you like to leave peacefully? They finally left, with Emma's dad turning back to say, this isn't what a real man would do. I just shake my head. A real man doesn't let himself be manipulated. The next day, Emma's family contacted Vanessa, trying to reopen the case. She shut it down immediately, reminding them about the conclusive paternity test. I also installed security cameras around my house and documented the confrontation in case they try something else. Mike's threat about knowing where I work was especially concerning, so I gave my boss a heads up about the situation. Thor's been extra clingy since that day. I've never been more thankful for this cat. Edit, thanks for the support. Yes, I filed a police report about the threats. No, I don't feel bad for Emma. I feel bad for the kid, but feeling bad doesn't mean I'm responsible.